Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
I cannot feel my hands or my fingers. It's a good job I bought Valerie gloves. Suggested by Mike Miller. It's Miller time. No, wrong advert. But Mike, good call on the Valerie gloves. Last year he suggested these and I bought a pair. And of course last week Mike came up with that Christmas list, which had Valerie gloves on them, which are very good for photographers. You just poke whatever pinky you want out. You can select the finger you use for your shutter button and poke that one out. It's sort of the top flicks back. It's like something out of a James Bond movie. And yeah, you can carry on photographing. But thank goodness for them. I mean, I can't feel my hands and I'm wearing the gloves. It's that cold. The storm season has hit in the UK. Brick wall, bang, suddenly there. People without power, as I told you last week. More storms on the way. Anyway, I think today I want to get a bit stuck into imposter syndrome, which I know many photographers suffer from. It's almost a rite of passage, it would seem, for photographers. That nasty little fella, imposter syndrome. Well, it's a nasty little fella in my case anyway, that sits on my shoulder from time to time and says, "Oi, you, you're not so hot. Don't be thinking you're so special. You're a hop, skip and jump away from being found out, you know." And there are usually at that stage, bing, I try and flick him off my shoulder. So, but not always. It's not always possible. So a couple of letters and posts on that today. For those listening at a certain time as well, 9:35 a.m, which I know is very specific, I should be bearing my arm to the good healthcare professional at my local vaccination centre for my booster, which used to be a shop, ironically, that sold specialised luggage for travel. I know not everybody believes in the vaccine, but if I am about to be told that I can't consume great quantities of polenta and oat milk latte, decaf lattes at the local mug and brew, because I don't have my full vaccine pass, ooh, polenta and oat milk decaf latte, Neil, my word, you've changed. Have I gone Cosmo on you? I was listening to a phone-in about mask wearing yesterday, which is an old radio phone-in chestnut now, isn't it? Bound to get the Daily Mail readers in a real tiz. One caller said they didn't believe in masks, like it was a phone-in on whether the man in the big red coat could deliver everything he needed to on December 24. They don't do nothing, said the caller, who clearly didn't believe in the letter G either. So I don't know. I'm hoping not to be laid too low, because I'm told the booster can make you feel like the first night after your first ever brush with too much Blue Nun wine when you were a teenager. Oh, my head. But, hopefully I feel like I'm sort of saving Christmas in my own small way, so the youth can go and enjoy their Christmas parties. Have some good old-fashioned snogging, which was also, that's a story that shot around the world. I saw it in the Washington Post. British politician bans kissing at Christmas. So here is my arm, do what you will, so the local pub can keep serving smokers' cough, which for the uninformed, and I found out the other day, is Jägermeister and mayonnaise. Who on earth thought of that as a party drink? You wouldn't want to snog anybody after that, would you? Changing the subject, here we are, Photowalk. I'm in Woodland. I think I'm going to spend a lot of time in Woodland this winter, partly because it helps the recording. If you've got lots of wind, it's almost impossible to walk across, or through a valley where there's no protection, because you won't hear a word that's being said. So that's one reason. But also there's so much gorgeous woodland that I haven't explored around my home that I want to take you through on these photo walks. And if we can get a sprinkling, a dab of snow, that'll make it even better. Not for us, Neil. Our power's down. Do you mind changing the subject? Oh, yes, sorry. A dusting of snow that doesn't take the power lines down. But a wonderful guest today. I went to see Mark Power in Brighton when I was recording the MPB special. Mark Power, yes, the Magnum photographer. And I'm delighted to have him on the show.
Today on the Photowalk.
You just have to play to your strengths, and I knew that I was interested in looking at the world, but I wasn't interested in chasing news at all. And so when I was in Berlin, I started to look at after a few days, I started to look at the story from a slight distance by going over to the east and looking at the people who were leaving rather than the people who were coming. I suppose that seems really simplistic, but I think in my own naivety at the time, because I didn't know what I was doing, I think it sort of pointed the way forward to everything I did since, really.
Stories of life told by photographers. And today, more of your stories about what photography means to you, why you make your pictures, what you make them about, how your camera helps you to see the world. It's a very different type of photography show. Today, I'm in Woodland. Me with my camera, you with yours, earbuds in and a mailbag of letters, plus of course our guest Mark Power, talking of work new and old, and a word about his seminal work, The Shipping Forecast, in a moment before we start today's walk. And we'll be hearing from former guests with snippets of inspiration, including Bert Stefani, a little more Valerie Jardin, and last week's guest, printer to photography's finest, Robin Bell. I'll tell you about today's letter topics in a moment. First, though, lend me a minute so I can share something about those who support this photo walk. Our friends at mpb.com are very precious to this show. They are the #1 platform in the UK, US and Europe when it comes to buying, trading or selling quality used kit online. They help photographers like you to tell your unique stories by giving you a safe place to buy, trade and sell the kit you need, and in doing so, you're part of a sustainable circular economy. So sell the kit you're not using, trade it in for the kit you'd like to create with, buy used, spend less and get more. Go to mpb.com. Our patrons are so precious too, with your generous and thoughtful help to keep the show ticking. From the price of one high street coffee per month, you are helping to build this show so it can continue in its mission to become a super diverse community of photographers from every interest, helping to guide, support and mentor photographers worldwide. So, what are we talking about today? Well, negative self-talk. Ooh, that very, very, very unwelcome bed partner in our lives. Leaving photography to find a love for it again. Learning to overcome gas. That's the gas to do with kit, not the gas due to excess, or you know what I mean. We're dodging the gulls in Norway land and Brighton and thinking of a way to use sound in a forthcoming exhibition of still pictures. But before we run the checklist to start our walk, a few words about our guest today and his work, The Shipping Forecast.
Viking, North Utsira, South Utsira. Southerly or southwesterly, 4 or 5, occasionally 6 at first in North Utsira. Thundery showers, good, occasionally moderate. 40s, Cromarty, 4th, time. South or southwest 4 or 5.
The Shipping Forecast is as old as the radiogram my grandmother and father had in their front parlour, which I would hear whenever I stayed with them. It's a BBC radio broadcast of weather forecasts for the seas around the coasts of the British Isles. The waters around the Isles are divided into 31 sea areas, also known as weather areas. Such names as Lundy, Fisher, German Bight, Forties, Viking. These are the mysterious names I heard read by a distinctly British announcer speaking in received pronunciation. I imagine them wearing a dinner jacket to read these important bulletins, just like they did in the 40s and 50s, and from the warmth of my grandparents' home as we drank tea from bone china cups, I would hear this bulletin and imagine the stormy seas they talked of. The best part of 3 decades have passed since photographer and Magnum member Mark Power made a photographic project and book that set out to photograph at 0600 hours every day from each area a documentary picture made from these, mysterious locations. And so when you hear us talk about the Shipping Forecast, which has a cult following among students of photography and always has, these are the areas from which he photographed. As he says on his website, intangible and mysterious, familiar yet obscure, the Shipping Forecast is broadcast on BBC Radio 4. For those at or about to put to sea, the forecast may mean the difference between life and death. But for millions of land-loving radio listeners, it's more than this. The enigmatic nature, says Mark, of the forecast has entered the public consciousness, creating a landscape of the imagination and confirming romantic notions of Britain's island status. It's the most fantastic piece of documentary photography, and if it's not yet in your collection, well, we have some news that you might be interested in today. Right, shall we walk then? Coffee and Garibaldi's packed. Check. Boots on and laced. Check. Warm walking pants or trousers, as we said last week. Check. Spare batteries. Check. Film or cards. Check. Earbuds in. Check. Lens caps off. Let's walk. Note to self, start of show. Try not to have too much of a cheery disposition when meeting strangers walking their dogs. I was, just a moment ago, a chap walked past me with his beautiful Labrador, very friendly, and he said, "Bit cold today, isn't it?" I said, "Oh, I suppose so, but it could be worse." I said, "There are colder places." He said, "Like where?" I said, "Well, Norway came to mind immediately." He said, "Who are you, f***ing Father Christmas?" I thought, oh, charming. And, well, there we go. Not sharing my Garibaldis with him. Maybe he was the phoning guy. Oh, maybe he was. Have I told you, by the way, have I told you lately, I'm going to burst into song today. It's one of I've not even been at the eggnog yet. Seriously. Oh, let me just get up before we start. Look at this. Magnificent. This is the sort of place where I'd like to stop for more than a few minutes and try and really pull the moss out of this tree, these beautiful green tones that are travelling up this twisted tree in front of me. Let me get a picture. Hold on. Let me put your letters down there for a second. And I can pop you in my top pocket because I've now got my my winter North Face jacket now. Definitely need this, so pop you in my top pocket so I can still talk to you while I'm making a picture. There we go. I brought out the X Pro 1 today with the Samyang lens, the 12mm lens, and because I want to get some wide shots today. Tim Binder, apologies because I know you sent me that wonderful other 28mm, but I knew that I was coming into woodland today and I needed to get slightly wider field of view. Where am I? I'm on ISO 800 and f4 250th. No, it's a bit dark. 1/2/5, everything manual. Everything manual when you use the X Pro 1 with either the vintage lens or the manual Samyang. Here we go. That's interesting. Battery's already at 2 bars. I thought I'd put a new one in. That's how cold it is. Let's rescue you from the pocket. There we go. Talking of Tim Binder, interesting. He's one of the 365 images. We'll come to 365 later on, but he was saying that he takes his walk where he is in America in three seasons out of the 4, so that he can avoid the snakes and the ticks in the summer. And of course, that's not something I ever need to consider. I probably need to consider grumpy dog walkers in winter, perhaps. That's my only consideration. So yes, have I told you how proud I am to read your letters and amazing posts? And I'm not just disingenuously saying that. I mean it. Starting again this week with something I spied in our incredible Facebook group. This is from Peter Langman, who posted something really interesting, particularly following last week's Photowalk where Robin Bell talked about imposter syndrome, my guest. And it's a kind of a sub-theme, a spotlight shone on something we do touch on from time to time, that of imposter syndrome. Hey all, says Peter, I dropped out of some groups for a while whilst I decided what to do with my photography and where I fitted in. Turns out I didn't need to decide. I got a call from a mother wanting some photographs of her daughter. She'd seen I was using film and a darkroom and wanted this kind of service. So what to do, sort of, found me. I've been doing team portraits, printing contact sheets, then helping the parents choose what to print. It's old school, but actually it's quite new again. These kids getting photographed are loving the new and old way of doing things. They don't understand how you can take a picture without seeing it. I know what you mean there, Peter. The kids are still fascinated. Even though they know that it's a film camera that I carry around sometimes, they still say, what? And they kind of remember, they stop themselves in the midst of the sentence. What do I... Oh, no, you can't see it. Oh, right, okay. Wait a couple of weeks. Yeah, that's the way it works. Yes, he says, these kids are loving this new old way. I'm printing up to A3 in my darkroom, and I'm loving every minute of it. Since learning film darkroom, etc., I've really started to believe in my photography as an art and a skill. With digital, I used to suffer badly with imposter syndrome. Let me explain. In my teens, I tried photography, but I really didn't give it the time or commitment it required, so I gave up with the attitude that it's just too hard. Roll on quite a few years, and I try again, but with digital. I became a wedding photographer, and so on. But in the back of my mind, I always considered that I failed back in the day. I remember I was at a wedding and was asked, could you do what you're doing with film? Oh, Peter, if I had a penny for every single time that question was asked. Along with, how many pictures have you taken, photographer? To which my reply is usually, as you know, something like 4.5 gallons. And I let them try and work out what that means. I didn't know the answer, says Peter, to that question. But, I now think I could. So I feel I've kind of put that one to bed. I recently sold all but one of my digital cameras, kept the Fuji X Pro 1. We are partners in X Pro 1s there, Peter. But to be honest, it never really gets used. I'm sure I'll pick it up again soon, but it's just not the same process, and it's the whole process that I actually enjoy. Plus, I really dislike computers, and that sort of feeds back into last week's show with our guest Robin Bell talking about his complete distrust of anything that has a chip in it. I was always starting projects during lockdown and not finishing them, says Peter, but it was only the other day I realised my lockdown project was my journey, actually, into film photography. The learning, the building of the darkroom, which just keeps going as you learn more and more and you gain experience. So I guess during the whole pandemic and still now, this photography thing has kept my mind active and has probably had a massive impact on keeping my mental health stable. I've rejoined this group because it's still one of the podcasts I listen to, and I really like the idea of community. Me too. I share that with you. I concur. So Peter, first up, thank you for joining us. Second time around, and I'm of course happy that you see this as a community. But then you've hit upon something really important, the imposter syndrome thing, which as I said at the start, a lot of creatives, ergo photographers, suffer with and from. That rite of passage almost, isn't it? Yes. There was a really good piece of advice I found by the creator of The Stoic Letter, a chap called Darius Farrow. I'll link to his website today on the show page, as I link to many things, including the pictures, of course, that are sent into the show from your own Photowalks. He suggested, did Darius, that there are 3 ways to tackle the all too common imposter syndrome. Firstly, acknowledge the feeling. It's completely normal to feel like you're not the right person for the job. Everyone, he says, has that feeling, even those at the top of their field. Take, of course, again, Robin Bell that we talked about, the greatest printer in the world. So it is normal. And even your heroes, says Darius, even they think that way. Secondly, and this is important, perhaps the big one, examine your motives. Are you working for attention, or are you working to make a genuine impact? Focus on the latter. Every time I write an article, he says, record a podcast or create a video, I think, this is just stroking my ego. But then that thought is countered by another more positive one. Well, there might be one person who finds this useful, and I make that the reason why I keep at it. And then, surprisingly, see yourself as a student. When you're creating, acknowledge that you don't know everything and that you're here to learn. And I think Peter, that was perfect timing with this particular sentence, because, Peter said it's all about learning now, isn't it? And building the knowledge and enjoying that that knowledge as you build. Darius says, if you take on this mindset that you're learning, imposter syndrome can't survive in your head because it has nothing to grab onto. You're not trying to fake a persona or manage a certain image. Instead, you're motivated by curiosity. Oh, motivated by curiosity. That. I'm going to write that. I'm going to write that in large letters on the whiteboard and pop that in the studio. I'm changing my mind. I think that's the big one, isn't it? Motivated by curiosity. You know, I do wonder personally whether the pressure comes from the outside world, screaming and shouting, "Look at me, look at me, look at me," you know. It's frankly exhausting, isn't it? So, yes, shake off the fake persona that's driven by this requirement for loves and likes, and be rather more motivated by curiosity. You can tell I like that, can't you? So I do want to come back to imposter syndrome, to a fabulous piece of work by one of our patrons who's made what I'm going to call an imposter syndrome pack of sorts, which I'm going to put today on a downloadable link. But just so you don't miss out on some very important parts if you don't get to the website, I'm going to give you some gems in a short while from his work. It's certainly changed my thoughts on those niggling self-doubts. So that the download link will be on the show page today. Right, some inspiration. It has to come from Robin Bell, doesn't it? Who shifted uncomfortably with the title Best Printer in the World, and I've used it a good few times since the start of the show. So Robin's listening again this week. Actually, no apologies, Robin, because I genuinely meant it. And they are the words of many, not just me. And really, if you print for the most fantastical names in photographic history, you deserve it. Here's Robin Bell from last week, sharing his passion for film and real silver gelatine prints.
It's a fairly simple formula insofar as I just go for the optimum print in terms of the technical side of it, but also it's going to tend to be a bit moody. I think it's a richness erring towards the darker side, lower key. I'm not bright and punchy. I'm all things like hopefully bright and punchy, but rich and tonal as well. So all those things combined in one end product. I pretty much always print on warm tone paper, but it's not warm as it can be. I don't use warm developer, for example, because it's a bit muddy compared to the black and white developer I use, which is PQ Universal at the moment. I think it's a rich print, never emaciated. I like the blacks to be rich but not dead, not oversaturated. So there's still some life everywhere you look on the print. And there are a few no-nos that any printer would steer clear of, which is an imbalance. If you've got something in the print that's drawing your eye away from what it should be looking at, then that has to be obliterated, or that has to be balanced, so that your eye is always drawn into the subject matter and I don't want to use the word hero, but you know, there's a point of interest in a photograph that can't be distracted from by some corner that's too light, or a shining highlight that's taking your eye away, or just so actually you just want to be drinking the print in. And I always think, when I think of printing, I think of bigger prints, 2016s, 2024s, exhibition prints, and people's experience of looking at those on the wall.
Robin Bell. I've been close to a few mistakes over the last few weeks with guests, and they've all been around labels. Robin wasn't too keen on the label of master printer, I know, because he doesn't consider himself to be, in the traditional sense of the word, a master. Imposter syndrome aside, etc. And the incredible Nick Brandt is a photographer, not a wildlife photographer. Labels, it seems, are a source of much angst. You have to get them right, or at least be comfortable with them. Wedding photographer. Yeah, coming back to wedding photographer that was mentioned by Peter Langman a moment ago. Hang on a second, look at this. What? You find the most incredible things in woods, don't you, in woodland? How on earth did this get here? I mean, we are nowhere near we're nowhere near civilization, as it were, and there's a rabbit hutch just sat here in the middle of nowhere. Hold on a minute. You won't believe me if I don't make a picture, so let's quickly make a picture here. What do we have? 1, 2/5, 5, 6. Here we go. ISO 800. Rabbit hutch. Rabbit hutch in the middle of nowhere. It's not going to win an award. That's proof that I'm just finding the strangest things. What on earth is that doing there? How bizarre. Yes, wedding photography, in terms of labels. Yeah, that one, it took me a long while, actually. And I still don't know if I'm properly cured. Cured, is this the correct word of it? But when people used to say, what do you photograph? The idea of saying wedding photographer, or what are you, wedding photographer, the idea of saying that to people didn't sit comfortably. And I suppose it was because of this persona that wedding photography has. Not just amongst peers, but to people who would then follow it up with, yeah, but what do you do for a living? So yeah, labels. Maybe that's a topic for the show. Send me your thoughts. Send them to studio@photographydaily.show. Your thoughts about the labels that we have as photographers, whether they're important, what we feel about them. Right, to your mails. I always feel a bit like Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, saying that. Okay, Robin, to the mailmobile. Letter from Paul Adaway from the Peak District, the wonderful Peak District, where I would be spoiled for choice finding places to walk far, far, far away from the madding crowd and grumpy Labrador walkers. Episode 259, says Paul, called Leaving Photography to Love It Again, struck a real chord with me. I'm a former local press photographer who left the business not for a carriage clock and retirement, but for the simple reason I'd completely fallen out of love with it. Less staffers in the local papers, and then a desire for those left to take more advertising pictures than real news ones. I mean, I had to get out before I completely lost my way. I felt like my eye had deserted me altogether. The last time I took a picture for reward was 18 years ago. I, like your guest, Bert Stefani, on that show, had to get out of it to get back into it again. These days, as a telecoms engineer, I'm removed from taking pictures for anyone except myself. And that has re-energized me. I've become a better photographer, in my mind at least, more observant, less rushed. It seems that not forcing it meant that it came more naturally. I do literally see pictures everywhere, but, and this is the important thing, I no longer feel I have to take a picture. Sometimes I see something, imagine what I might have done, and move on, happily. When I zipped up my camera bag in 2003, it took 6 years before I really took a picture again, aside from the odd family one. We never lose this love for it though, do we? It always seems to find us again. You're welcome in the Peak District, but bring your boots if you want to conquer Kinder Scout. 2,000 and a little bit feet. You'll need plenty of Garibaldis. All the best, and Paul. I did look up Kinder Scout, because I thought it can't be Kinder as in the chocolate, can it? Kinder. Maybe maybe that's your reward when you get to the top, but it is. I thought maybe it was Kinder Scout, but it's not. It is Kinder Scout, isn't it? So yeah, I love the Peak District. I've only walked a little bit there, but you're right. Can I leave that though to warmer times? But it's a tick from me. It's definitely a yes. Thank you for the invite, Paul. I'll take that as an official invite. Here's one that addresses that requirement in us all to have the latest shiny kit, from one of our important supporters of the show and patrons, from Mike Hongkomp. I made it out on a very misty Sunday morning, he says, to walk just over 9 miles, 20,000 steps, to test out the new Nikon Z 40mm f2 lens that temptation has put into my hand, to see if it's a worthy companion to the 50mm 1.8 I already have and love. I know I should be fighting the gas tendencies that plague me from time to time, but I just can't help myself. It's fitting that I was listening to your 2 episodes with Valerie Jardin to remind me to keep this in perspective. I've been a big fan of hers and have taken several online classes over the past year. I do love her minimalist approach, as I have time and time again found and forgotten, says Mike, how the limitations of our kit really do help enhance the creative process. Thanks to this long walk today, I was able to enjoy both parts of the interview with her, as I took a few shots with this shiny new kit, but was mindful, was it really getting me anything better than I already had? I was quite happy with what I managed to capture in this low light, some low-key black and white images, but really, what was I doing here? This isn't adding to my experience. I assume you mean the new lens. And, oh yes you do, and what I'm able to capture. So, I shall make use of some generous return policies and keep with my promise to myself last year of maintaining a lean gear shelf and focus on the process, the creativity, and most importantly, the self-reflection I find in the photographic experiences on these walks. So, yeah, well, you kind of answered your own question there, didn't you? Not that it was a question, I know, but the gas thing. Those pictures that you've sent in as well, wonderful, in the mist. I've put on the show page 4 in particular, where there was the mist with that fantastic picture of the aircraft going overhead, and then as the mist starts to clear across the airfield where you were walking close to. And I'll leave a link to Mike Honkomp's work as well on the show page today. So what to play for inspiration? There was a part of Valerie's interview where she talks about how liberating working with a simple setup is, but we featured Valerie quite a lot of late, so I'm going to play a few moments from Bert Stefani. I think actually no. Oh look, a robin has literally just arrived. Hello, darling. You're just going to follow me? Robins are amazing, aren't they? They do. What do they say about robins? That they are a soul of somebody departed, don't they? Look, this one's just following. Are you coming with me? Are we photo walking, Mr. Robin or Mrs. Robin? Are we? So no, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to do both. I'm going to play Bert and Valerie. Bert Stefani first up. Here he is talking about the exhaustion felt by feeding social media, being a slave to making photographs for the likes. That's what I prepared. But then, yes, a little more Valerie, live decision. I shall find the moment she talks about working with one camera, making life and decisions simple, photographically that is. But first up, here's Bert.
It had became something like you had to do, another thing on the list of to-dos, and not something that you wanted to do because you wanted to share an idea, you wanted to share a picture. And I basically said, screw it, if the algorithm is against me, then so be it. But I want to be real, I want to be authentic. But I also found out that I'd rather have one person telling me like, hey, your picture or what you wrote below it did something to me, than have 1,000 likes. I also disabled the likes counter because I think it has no value at all, but still we put a lot of value in it.
It's so liberating. I mean, the most important component besides the camera that's in your hand is the comfortable shoes. And that's definitely the most important part of your attire as a photographer, or as a street photographer. Just as long as you're comfortable and you can walk those miles, then focus on seeing. Yeah. Because it's definitely the moment that you're going to change lens that the shot of the day is going to happen. I've been using the same camera for 8 years. Well, a different edition, but I don't need anything else. So I don't have gear envy or gear lust or gas or whatever you call it. I don't care.
Valerie Jardin, and before that, Bert Stefani. That robin is still with me. Oh, this is I've got a 12mm lens, and the robin is staying, a distance from me, but keeping a watchful eye. You really are following me, aren't you? I wish you'd sing. I need some proof you're here. Oh. A massive, welcome to the Photowalk. Just in case you're joining us halfway through, I've been through this before. You have, haven't you, Neil? Yes, nobody joins you halfway through a podcast, but I do feel sometimes I need to explain. Welcome to the Photowalk. It's just you, just me, with our cameras, taking a walk. You don't have to be an expert photographer, a landscape photographer, or whatever kind of photographer. You can be just somebody who enjoys taking out their iPhone of a weekend and making, or whenever you walk with this podcast, and making some pictures and popping them on your Instagram. So welcome along. And as ever, if you have anything you'd like to share with us from your walks, because it's super to put that on the show page. I really want to feature where you're walking. Hello. Honestly, this Robin right in front of me now. You are gorgeous. Then do send it in. studio@photographydaily.show. studio@photographydaily.show. Right, my little soul is going to follow me along here while I say a massive, massive hearty thank you, as I was about to. If you've been sending in pictures for the 365, we will need more. We've reached that, or reaching that 100 stage, aren't we? So at this point, I need you to step up during your winter. Step up, Neil, that sounds rather demanding. I didn't mean it to sound demanding. And share those winter walks. Obviously, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, otherwise, those beautiful summer barbecues. But let us know where you are in the world. Send some pictures of where you're walking. They don't have to be magnificent vistas. We do have some beautiful sunset pictures that we've had of late as well. But equally, just, you're heading out along a path. It's great to know where you are and see where you are in the world. So thank you for those so far. Keep sending them in. 2,000 pixels on the long side, non-watermark, please, to studio@photographydaily.show. And remember to send me a link to your website so that I can link back to you and others can join you in your web adventures. We're going to hear from Mark Power in a moment, the Magnum photographer, with some new work and older work to talk about. That wind's coming up now. Can you hear it? I'm in woodland, but I am sheltered to a degree. If I were out and about on a ridge or something today, I dare say you wouldn't be able to hear me at all. Let's walk a bit further into the woods itself. So first of all, before we hear from Mark, your work, some of the walks that you've been on that I want to share on the Photowalk show page today, which you'll find a link for in the podcast app. Wallace Shackleton took a walk a little while back, and I've been meaning to feature this for a while, so apologies, Wallace. That's all right, Neil. Don't do it again. Neil, I finally got around, he says, to making a Friday photo walk. I took the dog out to Port Moke Moss, which is an SSSI, a site of special scientific interest, being a rare example of a raised lowland peat bog. These pictures, I'll put them on the show page today. I did have to go look up Port Moke. So Port Moke provides refuge to all sorts of wildlife, roe deer, red squirrels, wide variety of birds, and mosses. The site is also a hotspot for damsel and dragonflies, butterflies and moths. And it looks pretty quiet too. Where do I sign up for a visit to this one? But thank you for the pictures. And that building you came across in the middle of the woodland, it looks like a kind of Hansel and Gretel, don't go too near the cottage kind of place, doesn't it? I could almost, I don't know whether I'm reading too much into this, but I could almost sense your distanced nervousness in the picture, Wallace. Unless, as I say, my imagination was really running away with me, probably. You know me, it was. Also, one from a couple of months ago here as well, from Kevin Rugland in Norway land. First, when I first read it, I read Stavanger, but that's wrong, isn't it? It's Stavanger. Hi, Neil. I thought I'd feed your mailbag for once. For the last week, I've grown tired of the XH1 camera with the zoom lens I had, and I craved some challenges. Challenge? Do you mean taking a pinhole out? That's a challenge. This led me to researching the X100V that you've mentioned on your show, and the Fujicast as well. Do you know what? The amount of X100 units, I think, between myself and Kevin, that we've shifted. We should work at a camera store. We should be on commission. So yes, he says, I've bought an X100V. I found one for sale in Stavanger, Norwayland, and I decided to buy it and test it out on a photo walk and street photo. walk in the middle of a city. Hope you enjoy the pictures. And I did. They're wonderful. There are some intriguing moments in there, namely the two people walking through a park just before your snows arrived. I reckon they must have done by now, surely. Have you got them? You should have, shouldn't you? These two people in your photograph are just waltzing through the park with one of them dressed in a coronavirus fancy dress outfit. It's just the way that they're walking that tickled me, as if this person always wears the outfit. Yeah, just going out for a stroll with my best mate, dressed in my virus suit. And then the wonderful people passing through the light pools. Oh, they're fantastic. There's two of those, and great timing as well with the sign marker, which is a sign to warn people about gulls. I can only imagine Norwegian gulls are feisty things, that you should need a sign to warn people about them in a city centre. But the timing was great in your photograph, with a gull flying in the space between the sign and the roof. You'll see this if you look on the show page today. And they're on the page. There is a link that's here in your app. And talking of links, tenuous one, Neil? No, not so tenuous. I do like to make them, whether it's letters and previous guest gems, or in this case, feisty gulls. When I went down to Brighton, it would have been a couple of years ago, with Mullins, Facundo Santana and Patrick Larocque, who are all photographers, and we walked and we made street pictures. Well, actually, I pretty much watched Facundo and Patrick in particular in action. They were completely devouring the scene, as you do when you go to a country that's not your own, and they were furiously making pictures. And right in front of us, a huge gull, about the size of a small light aircraft, swooped down and properly mugged this poor tourist for her bag of chips. She was so shocked. So there was a kind of dumbfounded kind of reaction. It wasn't a scream or anything. It was like, what just happened? Which Pat, I think, made a good few pictures of. I think from memory, I think he was like a quick shooter, proper. He was. Pat got straight in there. And then more recently, I've been down to Brighton, and this is where Mark Power lives, the Magnum photographer. And I was down to record my MPB special, which I'm looking forward to playing to you. I've interviewed and filmed Mark before a couple of times, once for Magnum and a Fujifilm collaboration. So I looked him up when I went down this time, and managed to eke out just a little time on the off chance with him to chat about one new project and a revisit to the wonderful shipping forecast work too. So here's part one of my two conversations today with my guest, Mark Power. Mark, I remember a good photographer friend, and I think I've discussed his name with you before, who said when he knew I was visiting on the first time that I met you, when we were talking about the home exhibition, he credited you with the fact that he was a photographer at all and had made a dissertation about the shipping forecast. And he said he wouldn't be a photographer if it wasn't for Mark Power. And that's not to introduce hot air to warm the atmosphere at the start of our conversation. But I hope it's a much more interesting way of asking you who your inspirations were as you began. Now, I know you didn't start as a photographer, you started in the art world, but surely you were inspired by people.
I like to think I'm still in the art world, but...
Well, you are, yes.
No, I started as a painter, yeah. To be honest, Neil, when I first became a photographer, I thought foolishly that I shouldn't know anything about the history of photography, because I thought that would mean that I would start being derivative and start copying other people. So I knew very, very little about the history of photography right back then, and looking back at the work I was making, it shows. And then I had this revelation that I really needed to understand what had gone before, otherwise I felt like I was reinventing the wheel. So I started to do a lot of reading about the history, and particularly about the history rather than theory books, certainly at the beginning. But then when I started teaching photography at the university level in 1992, which was only, well, I say only, it was 10 years after I decided to become a photographer, I became a university lecturer. And of course at that point I had to start thinking about all of this. I had to start reading more so that I could try to stay one step ahead of the students, and that was challenging. And since then, I've become an avid photo book collector, and I still, do a lot of reading, and I look at a lot of contemporary work. So, influences, to go back to your question, are many and varied, and I think I'd like to put it the other way around slightly, that when I start a new project, it's usually because I'm looking at a particular kind of work at that time. So when I started the shipping forecast, for instance, I was looking at people like Tony Ray Jones and Chris Killip and the much underestimated Raymond Moore, who made a lot of wonderful work up in the northwest of England, sadly no longer with us. Nor is Tony Ray Jones, nor is Chris Killip, actually. So they've all gone. So I think they were the people I was looking at, and then I was also looking at Martin Parr, but he was working in colour by the time I really discovered him. So which confused me a little bit, but I doggedly carried on in black and white. Then when I turned to my 5x4 camera when I was working at the Millennium Dome in about 4 or 5 years later, that was because I was looking at a lot of German and American large format work, and I wanted to work in large format, and I wanted to do something that was slightly architectural, dare I say, but although I never want to say that I'm an architectural photographer, because I don't think I am. I was interested in the built environment, I suppose, more than anything else, and so I shifted the way that I worked because of what I was looking at. And now I look at a lot of different stuff, including things that you might be surprised to see me look at, which seems to bear no resemblance to my own work, and it's too many and varied to tell you any names. But I buy books which don't have anything to do with what I do, because I just like looking at things that I find it difficult to do.
Do you find yourself being influenced by them? Because I know you've said that, for example, sort of the photojournalistic work that you did actually when you witnessed the Berlin Wall coming down, but that's not something that you wanted to continue with, that style, was it? No,
I never saw myself as a photojournalist. No. It just wasn't my thing. I don't particularly like categories anyway, but there is a difference between a photojournalist and a documentary photographer. I am dealing with the real world. I suppose my skill set was not in photojournalism. I could see that very clearly very early on. I knew a lot of photojournalists, and they were very, very smart in a particular way, which, they had skills that I just didn't have. But I think I had skills that maybe they didn't have, if I dare say. I think it was you just have to play to your strengths. And I knew that I was interested in looking at the world, but I wasn't interested in chasing news at all. And so when I was in Berlin, I started to look at after a few days, I started to look at the story from a slight distance by going over to the east and looking at the people who were leaving rather than the people who were coming. I suppose that seems really simplistic, but I think in my own naivety at the time, because I didn't know what I was doing, I think it sort of pointed the way forward to everything I did since, really.
That was quite a serendipitous moment, really, because you were visiting Berlin for personal reasons when you went to photograph the wall coming down. I wonder how life might have been different had we had 100,000 people with a smartphone that day.
Well, it would have been totally different. I mean, I wasn't really visiting for personal reasons. I was visiting because I'd been looking at the situation developing, and I'd just started courting with Joe, who I'm still with, whose family comes from Eastern Europe, and I was going there because I had a letter of introduction from them to go over to the East, and I was going to do a story about what it was like to be living in the East. And the day that I arrived in Berlin, that's when it all happened. So it's a kind of personal, but also I was definitely chasing something. I was looking, which makes me sound like a photojournalist, because for once in my life I was actually seemed to have my finger on the pulse of what was happening. But whenever I talk about that Berlin experience to young photographers these days, I immediately say, don't expect this to happen to you, because we're now in a world where everything would be on Instagram and Twitter and everything else, immediately, even before it's even happened almost. And And I think part of the charm of looking back at that work from Berlin is to see the very few people that were there that had their Praktika cameras.
I want to rewind just very slightly. Your decision to more fully embrace photography kind of owes a bit of credit really to a Don McCullin exhibition, another great photojournalist of ours, and the fact that you were stood in an exhibition witnessing somebody else's extreme reaction to the photographs that she saw, weren't you?
Apparently, yes. I mean, there was a woman in the gallery. I was in a room. It was just me and her. I didn't know her, and she was in tears while she was looking at the pictures. I never knew why. She could have been crying for any number of reasons, but I like to believe that it was because she was genuinely moved by these things. And it was the same day that I was a third-year student, painting student. I had been to see a Mark Rothko show the same day. Yeah. The Russian abstract painter.
And learn how to look at the pictures.
And I'd been told how to look at the pictures at college, and so I looked at the pictures and I got all the right, wobble and everything. But I think seeing the reaction of that woman made me think that here was a medium, photography, that you didn't need any training to be able to get an emotional reaction from it. You can get extreme emotional reactions from a Rothko if you know what you're doing. But to a certain extent, you do have to be taught how to do it. And, viewing distance and where you're supposed to look through the painting and all of that sort of stuff. And it works. But I think, I was 21 years old at the time, and I thought to myself, I really this is really interesting that photography can move people at such a basic level. Now, of course, she may have been crying for other reasons. She may have been trained as a photographer. I mean, who knows? She may know Don personally. I don't know any of those things, but the romantic in me wants to believe, and I think to a certain, I'm right. I think to a certain, photography does have that ability to communicate in a very raw and basic level, as is borne out by the popularity of museums having photography shows. They're always, or usually, among the most popular, unless, of course, it's a big, Rembrandt show or something. But
how do you hope people emotionally engage with your pictures then? Because, we're talking two very different emotions here.
I don't think if my work has ever reduced anyone to tears, it's probably not for the right reasons. I don't think so, because my work doesn't have that kind of emotional content to it, and it's not trying to be. It's much more objective, dare I say, in its what it's trying to do.
I've heard you colloquially eulogise, frankly, about the sort of the very basic instinct you have as a person to be, here's a simple word, nosy, which I know seems simplistic, but it seems to me that that's a very potent driver in your photography. Would that be true?
Yeah, I think now I've been a photographer now for 40 years, goodness me. It's given me a wonderful life, and if I was to go under a bus tomorrow, I could hardly, complain about where it's taken me. It does give you that passport to look at into other people's lives and other people's circumstances, and to travel and see places that I wouldn't otherwise see. It does also mean, on the other hand, that I never go anywhere tourists are supposed to go to, or if I do, I never see the things that you're supposed to see, because I always think I'm wasting my time doing that. So, I've seen a lot of places, but then again, I haven't, if you know what I mean.
Does that mean your family are dragging you? So come on, this way. Stop looking at the back streets and come.
Well, if I'm with family, I really try to do it properly. I really try. And it's not just about going to the back streets. It's just that, I take a guidebook with me for a place, and it's telling me to go here, here, and here, and I just don't do it, because I don't have the time to do it. And I always regret it, because, there are reasons why these places you're supposed to go there. But
well, this is probably a very good time to mention your latest work on Guernsey. Now, we're sort of flip-flopping backwards and forwards here. You have to sort of have a TARDIS to keep up with our time scales because I want to talk about the shipping forecast. It'd be completely out of order. But Guernsey, of course. Now, you haven't approached that as a picture postcard project, your latest one, have you? No,
that's my new book. It's called Terre à la Monde, which means private land or keep out. It's a difficult French term to translate exactly. It's a commission that I got from the Guernsey Photography Festival, and actually completed the work about 2 or 3 years ago. So I've had plenty of time to think about this, and I think that passage of time has really helped. But I did have a show at the end of in the Guernsey Museum of the work. So this is slightly different. It's a bit expanded from that, and it takes as its premise the fact that we had 2 family holidays on Guernsey. It markets itself as a idyllic holiday location, has done forever, and it still does. But it has a rather uncomfortable. Well, it has a population which is half, local people that have been there for generations, and then of course the banking and insurance financial sector. And those two, I'm not saying they're entirely incompatible, but they don't sit particularly comfortably side by side. And I was reading the local newspaper, and I was reading that there's about domestic abuse and things like this, which happens everywhere. Guernsey is no different from anywhere else. It's just not the place that it's made out to be. Now, and this sounds like I'm picking on Guernsey. It's not. It's a kind of microcosm for a lot of places like this that present itself to the world as this, but in fact, it's not entirely true. So I started to think about the images that I've seen of Guernsey, and I continue to see of Guernsey, which are this picture postcard place. And I started to think about, well, if I was making a postcard for the tourist board, I would think about precisely where to stand, precisely when to take the picture in the right kind of weather. So that it gave this very idealized version of this particular kind of landscape. And in doing that, I know, and this would apply to a painter doing the same thing. In doing that, I clearly, this person has edited out 99% of the rest of the stuff, because they don't want that in there. It's rather like taking a picture and missing out cars because you don't want the image to date, So I just thought it would be interesting to take it the other extreme and see if I could portray Guernsey at the other end of that spectrum, as this sort of dark place where all is not as it seems. And so I did countless walks crisscrossing the island, because it's not very easy to park in Guernsey. And in fact, it's not very easy to. Most of the pictures, because of the title, most of the pictures are taken are in places that I shouldn't necessarily be, because you almost can't avoid it. Then what I did is I presented this as this is as fictional a response to what Guernsey looks like as a picture postcard is. It's just a different response. So it makes the point that if you look at a place in a particular way and you have a camera and you record the way you look, when you start to, metaphorically speaking, lift the stones and look underneath, you find things unexpected, and you would find that anywhere. That's the point I'm making. But on the other hand, perhaps my version, because it isn't entirely doom and gloom, but it is a sort of darker version, perhaps, just perhaps, it may be closer to the truth of what it's like than a picture postcard ever could be.
Mark Power will return shortly for part 2 of my chat with him. Every Saturday we have a patron-only show called More, which isn't designed to make people feel shut out of the extra stuff that this show does. No, it's a thank you, a very personal thank you to those who spend, I don't know, $5 plus per month to make sure that this show can remain here as a podcast, a source of inspiration and a platform, and I think a very unique one, which allows you to be the voice through your letters, your messages. The why over the how, as we've said in the past. We're more about the touchy-feely, aren't we, rather than the kit and tech talk here. And last Saturday, the More featured a question from one of our patrons about going on the road to record audio alongside still images, which actually, ironically, was a touch of the tech and the how. It was a question from one of our patrons, Gurmeet Danjal, who also shared with us 3 spectacular ideas for personal photo projects, which I love the idea of, Gurmeet. I know one was a very simple family one, but the idea that you were putting sound into it, super. But I had this from James Langmuir, who was commenting on the Brighton edition. Oh, link again, Neil. I know, from a few weeks ago, which of course was when I interviewed Mark. I was interested, says James, to know how you approached the 2 female sea swimmers you spoke with on the Brighton Photowalk. I'm not sure you want to share the secret, but did you approach them before you switched your microphone on? Although it sounds like you naturally just walked up and started chatting. I'm interested because I want to do some street portraits and use the idea that you've talked about, recording sound to be used alongside their pictures. My plan is to have a local exhibition where I feature simple street portraits of people from my hometown of Broadstairs, which is in Kent, isn't it? From memory, Kent. Broadstairs, Kent. I'm sure it is. Did we have a 365 from Broadstairs? Oh, I'll have to check. And in the room, I'm going to have conversations that I've recorded. So how did you approach them, and did you think of an idea to talk with them about before you did so? It feels to me like street photography plus. So James, I'm going to level with you. I needed it to have, for it to seem like a seamless walk-in, and to a degree it was. They'd seen me recording, so I simply said, from afar to be honest, I'm making a podcast. Could I talk? That sort of motion to them, of which they said yes. And so I said, well, give me a minute. And they must have looked at me. So I'm sure they did, as I turned my back on them straight away. And I recorded instantly the introduction that you heard. So then I turned back in and spoke to them. So I kind of asked for their permission, but not in an elongated, windful way. It was really on a spur of a moment. And my experience, James, is that most people really, they're happy to talk. In the same way that when you ask people for a street portrait, many people are happy to have one made, and if they're not, you just move on. Unless you're carrying a clipboard. Now, this is important because I do carry a clipboard with your letters on it, because I think there's the thought that you might be a chugger, the derogatory phrase for people asking for subscriptions, if you're not quite sure what a chugger is. So yeah, having a clipboard and a microphone, or something that looks like a microphone, even though I carry an iPhone, but it's not been a particular problem, no. But there's two ways of doing it. You can either actually go up introducing your piece, which is practically what I did really, which works for a podcast. But for a street portrait, I mean, your audio piece is probably going to come after you've made the picture, I would imagine, unless you mount the microphone in the hot shoe adapter on the top of your camera. In which case, actually, the Zoom H1 recorder, we're getting tech. Neil, did you say, I know. You can mount a Zoom H1 really easily because it's got a little thread underneath. You can mount that onto a hot shoe on the top of your camera. And it's a good weight for that. It weighs nothing, really, at all. And so that way, I suppose you could ask some questions while you're shooting. I would probably make my picture, then ask if I could record a few moments and just be honest about what it is that you're doing. Friendly, informal approach, big smile, and you'll find people are frankly, as you heard, really just quite intrigued by what it is you're doing. And I have thought actually about stopping people a bit more often on the Photowalks if the moment arises. Obviously not the chap with the dog right at the start of the show. That would have been an interesting one, peppered with curse words aimed at me. But yes, just occasionally making a portrait. It'll be a woodland portrait in my case, of course, over the next few weeks in particular, while I'm walking. But let me play you that clip from Brighton. If you missed it, it's an opportunity to hear exactly what we're talking about, stopping people. You won't hear the bit where I ask for a portrait at the end, but that's what I did. This, in essence, is the approach with a microphone and camera to chat with people and make some pictures of the sea swimmers in this case. One thing I've seen off the coast today is people swimming in the sea. They must be mad. And there are two ladies here that I'm going to go and talk to because they didn't so long come out of the sea. They're standing there in their long jackets. Hello. Can I doorstep you, so to speak, on the beach and ask you some questions? You've both been swimming, because I saw you, and I thought at the time, they must be mad. This must be... are they on... Well, I'm using that word very carefully because some people use this, don't they? Because they do it for sort of mental health benefits as much as anything.
That's why.
So I need to know your names first of all. Lady in the hat, looking really. Well, you're not cold actually. You look.
You're wrapped up.
You're wrapped up. You've got a white hat on. You look really warm.
Yeah, I am.
So, sorry, what's your name?
My name's Jess. Hiya.
Jess and
Millicent.
So, Millicent, you nodded your head furiously when I said the mental health benefits,
Yeah,
and we talk about that a lot on this podcast. So that's not the reason you did it, or is it?
100% it is. So last year, so this is Jess and I's second winter going into like doing a full winter of swimming, of sea swimming. But I would say until last year, I really struggled in the winter for me. I had seasonal affective, problem. I really because Brighton's a holiday destination. The city comes alive in the summertime. It's full of people. Everyone's out. It's like sunny, and your life is just full of beers on the beach and swims in the sea and getting sunburned, and I absolutely love it. But a big part of living in Brighton for me was always my last swim of the year, which for me used to be in kind of early to mid-September. And it felt like the beach was just shut off from me for 5 months. It just like packed up shop and didn't see it. And last year Jess and I were sitting down, and I was like saying I was very upset, saying, you know, when's our last swim going to be? And I remember Jess leaning over to me and going, Millie, people do this all year round. I've seen them. we don't have to stop. We can keep doing this.
Can you hear that? Oh, he's flown off. That was the robin. Followed me all the way, honestly. During this photo walk, I'm sure he or she has followed all the way. Oh, gorgeous. Anyway, a snippet from the Brighton podcast talking to beach swimmers. I'm amazed that the temperature of the sea doesn't seem to drop between the months of July and November. It was somewhere between, it was a number between 2 and 5 degrees, wasn't it, that the sea stays. And it doesn't change whether it's July or November. I couldn't quite believe that, but they're the sea swimmers, they're the experts. I'll bow to their better knowledge and shivers. Just to go back quickly to talking or interviewing using a microphone, if you want to start doing that with your photography for your street portrait project, then in terms of what you ask, I guess really just show that thing that we talked about right at the start of today's Photo Walk show. Be motivated by your curiosity, and remember you can really just snip out your ers, nums and pauses if you're new at it, so you don't panic about having to have a really or sounding, overly fluid and very professional as a broadcaster, love. Just snip out the ers and ums. You'll find your feet. Try not to ask too many closed questions, the ones that can bring about a yes or a no. But good luck with that project. It sounds a lot of fun. What a great idea, eh? Having the portraits in the room, local portraits of local people in the room, and then to have on loop a recording of those that you've spoken with. My idea was to have frames with headphones dangling underneath from a hook, so that you could listen to the person that's in the frame, which probably wouldn't work in these ages or these days where we have to sanitize practically everything that's touched by somebody else. But those times will return. So good luck with the project. Right, Mark Power returns in a moment. But today we had, if not a loose theme, certainly a focus on this thing that creatives and in this case us. Oh, that wind's really getting up. Whew. That's telling me to get back to the car soon, isn't it? Storm on the way, yes, appreciate that. But yes, this loose theme today, this thing that us as photographers have, that being imposter syndrome. Photographer, and let's face it, in this case, we'll make him Patron of the Week, Mike Miller. That's 3 mentions, Mike, in 2 weeks. He wrote a study piece on it. Mike, you should have your own introduction jingle. Last week, the gift list. This week, your work on imposter syndrome. Frankly, marvellous. And if you like what you hear from Mike, it's a professional piece that he wrote, then you can download the PDF and the piece, the study that he's written. You can download that from the show page today. It has some worksheets and flowcharts, written commentary and so on. It's called Controlling Negative Self-Talk and Thoughts. And this is what Mike said. I've been hearing a lot about imposter syndrome lately. I have some resources that might be helpful with realigning that little person in a red suit. See, you've given him a red suit that sits on our shoulder, or it could be a her, and talks to us on occasion. It's not Santa if that's what you were thinking, he says in brackets. I've done presentations in the past on mental training as it applies to sports performance. So I went through my notes and I pulled something together that's related to imposter syndrome. I think that the rise of trolls on social media has contributed to this syndrome, coming more to the forefront of late. While YouTuber Sean Tucker says that I've never met a talented troll, negative comments from others tap into those primal fears that we may have experienced on the schoolyard, playground, from the mean kids, or even worse, the bullies. Our parents, maybe our siblings, our teachers, our coaches, and many others. It takes some real mental toughness and a high level of self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-worth to get through some of these things. Otherwise, you start to believe that what others have been telling you, well, it may actually be true. And sometimes we can be our own worst enemy, our negative self-talk. Those things that we say to ourselves when something wasn't done to our internal satisfaction, the put-downs we make to ourselves, our own comparisons that we make against others. Maybe we are perfectionists and that feeds into our negative self-talk and imposter syndrome. For me, says Mike, imposter syndrome is just a variation of negative self-talk. Like athletes, performers and competitors, there are techniques that we can use as photographers when we find we're having those negative conversations with ourselves. The key is to recognize when you have negative thoughts and literally think or scream to yourself, stop! I'd shout it out loudly, but there's a person just ahead, and he probably might think I'm talking to him. Replace those thoughts with more appropriate ones. Change the radio station that is playing in your head. I like that expression. Change the radio station playing in your head. If you have to, pop a musical tune into your head and think about that instead. So that's just a taster, and it's a small taster, this superb piece that Mike has written within his work making presentations on mental positive thinking for those in sport. So if you want to download the whole thing, it is on the show page today, and let me know your thoughts and to enjoy it. It's a phenomenal piece of work, and thank you, Mike. Thank you very much indeed. Right, let's return to Mark Power, shall we? Now, on my visit, we had limited time because he was doing something that at that time we couldn't talk about. It was kind of an embargoed conversation of sorts. It was his wedding, Mark's wedding, 32 years with his partner Joe, and then they were getting married. So he was in the midst of wedding planning, so that's why we had limited time. But he, as always, he was very generous, Mark, and it ended up being a slightly longer conversation. And nonetheless, it's a pleasure always to talk with a photographer at the top of his game about just being a photographer and the projects that he's made during his time working as himself, as a photographer, and of course as a member of the Magnum agency as well.
So I've been very lucky to have been able to, if only for a very short time, walk the street with you. And I've watched you. You do like, well, you call it the beauty of the overlooked, the neglected, the forgotten. It's something that draws you, isn't it? Those three words.
It does. It's a little bit of a photographic cliche now, but I mean, yes, it's true. I like places that I can feel some kind of ownership of because I go there several times. So Guernsey, for instance, I got to know Guernsey very well from all of my trekking backwards and forwards, and I started to feel like it was my place to photograph, and this also explains why I never go anywhere I'm supposed to go to, as in because I'm not particularly interested. So you could call it the beauty of the overlook, certainly, and I'm still trying to make really beautiful, gorgeous pictures, even of things that are dark.
Would you explain perhaps Good Morning America to be a similar kind of study in that respect? Not all of it. I mean, I'm particularly looking at the New Mexico work. I'm thinking right now of the McDonald's sign that's hanging off, and then we're in the swimming pool. Yeah, well, I mean, inevitably, photographers tend to be drawn towards things that are broken and damaged, but I'm also very aware of this phenomenon of ruin porn, for want of a better word, that, chasing things that are falling apart. So I keep reminding myself not to do that because to a certain extent it's a little bit easy. America is, as we know, it's the greatest country in the world, and yet it has many of the greatest problems in the world at the moment, and it's immensely divided. And that's not just Trump, but he exacerbated that issue. And I'm visiting it very much from the perspective of someone from somewhere else who's grown up with this idealized vision of America from my childhood. So there's all of that. That's my starting point. But when people say, "What are you photographing in America?" My answer to that is that I can't say that I'm doing this or this, because for me, after 40 years of doing this, I don't see the world like that. I don't see the world as people wearing red hats, to be extreme, like the classic photography projects, go and photograph people wearing red hats and then you see them all, but you don't see anything else. So I'm trying to leave myself open. I don't have a thesis I'm trying to prove. I'm collecting pictures of things that I think are interesting. Then I'm spending an awful lot of time editing and sequencing the work and making sense of it. Far more time than I spend actually making the pictures, because that's the easy bit. And I think that what I'm doing is I understand that all of these things are interconnected. It's not, life and issues like this are not one thing. They're many, many things. So I go to America and I work hard, make the pictures that I think I'm interested in making, and they could be of all sorts of things. And then I try to assemble it into something meaningful afterwards, if that makes sense, with the benefit of a bit of space. Yeah. So I put pictures on Instagram immediately when I'm traveling. The same day I've made those pictures, and they're on Instagram. But that's me trying things out, really, and playing around. I need time and space away from the work in order for it to make more sense to me. So when we come to the shipping forecast, because that might be a good segue into that, is that, with the benefit of 25 years since the project finished, I went back and started looking at those contact sheets again and thinking, some of this is actually quite interesting. Because, and I'm looking at this amazing layout of what's going to be. I feel like I've got a window into the new book that other people aren't privileged to have.
Well, it's not really a layout. It's just, I wish it was. I wish I'd got that far down the track. It's what you're looking at there is my new magnetic board, which I'm very proud of. Yeah.
I'm seeing work that nobody else has seen of this project.
Yes, you are.
I feel like I should take a photo. I won't.
I'll put them all on Instagram. Don't worry. I went through my contact sheets. So there's like 1,197 rolls of film.
Oh my word!
But there's only 12 pictures on it, so it's like 12 times 12, 144. I think that's 14,400 pictures, not 144,000, but it's an awful lot, whatever it is. Yeah. And so it was just interesting to look. And you know what, Neil? I never thought I'd reach the point where I didn't remember a picture that I'd taken, but there were lots in there that I thought could have been done by somebody else. Not necessarily anything you're looking at now, but things that I think, I don't remember this at all.
Are you happy with the work that you saw, that you couldn't necessarily identify with yourself?
I've left it a little bit behind now because I've just come back from South Korea, where I've been for almost a month, and of course that took over a bit, and there's all sorts of other things going on. So it's on the back burner at the moment. So the idea of the spring reprint is is probably a bit ambitious. But I think the thing is that even though that first book, The Shipping Forecast, which was my first book, was printed, it was sold out quickly on the first edition, and we reprinted it twice more. So, and in fact, we made 10,000 copies, and they all sold and quickly. And so, even though there are so many copies out there, it's for some reason or other very, very expensive on the secondary market. It's become a bit of a cult book because there's a lot of people who haven't seen it. I think it's on the shelves of a lot of dads who don't really know what to do with it. They've got this book. Their daughter gave it to them for Christmas 25 years ago or something, and so they've still got it. And they don't realise what especially if they have a first edition, they don't really realise what they're sitting on. So if anybody's out there listening and has a first edition they want to sell me, I'd be very
Sadly,
pleased.
mine isn't a first edition.
No. Yeah, I only have 2 first editions myself, and they're a bit bashed up now, which is a real shame. But I just thought it would be good to do it again. I don't usually do reprints, but I thought in this case it might be interesting to do a whole new design, but instead of the 60 pictures in the original, to make this like 150 maybe, and see. I mean, I'm not decided on the number yet, but I want to be ambitious enough to think that I can make it that kind of size. So it's a very, very different book from the original one.
You must get frustrated by the particular pictures people pull out of that book to ask you about, and think, why on earth are you asking me about that image? But there is one image that I want to ask you about. It's Dogger, which lies between, it's just below Forties, isn't it? Just above Humber. And you made the picture in 1996, June the 30th. Not that you're going to remember necessarily that date.
Try me.
But you're on board a ship, and at the end of the corridor, there isn't a Navy officer or a merchant Navy officer. There's a uniformed Grenadier Guard. I'm always quite confused by that picture.
It's a ferry.
It's a ferry.
Yes, I tried wherever possible to be on public transportation. There was only once when I had to go on a Met Office research flight over Sierra Sol because there was no other way of getting there. But there's a ferry that goes between Newcastle and Bergen that goes through 4 tricky sea areas to reach. So I did that trip 4 times. So you say this is the beauty of photography, and the sad thing about talking about it, because I'm going to ruin it for you.
You're going to disappoint me now, aren't you?
It's a picture of a picture.
I thought you were going to say that.
But because it's in black and white, you see it.
I think it's the real man.
It does look like a real person. If it was in colour, it would clearly.
Yeah.
You'd clearly be able to read what it was straight away. So yes, and it's because it's life size. So he's got his Beefeater hat and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are sometimes when black and white really, really works.
I just want to come back to Good Morning America, because of course clearly this dreadful 18 months to 2 years of COVID activity has certainly curtailed projects. I'm sitting with you on the day that America have opened their borders once more to flight for us. So I assume you'll be back to work on the Volume 4 now, but Volume 3 was sort of completed just prior to everything closing.
Yes. No, Volume. I came back.
Or rather, you edited.
I came back on February. I think it was February the 8th or something like that. The day I left America, the day before I left for the last time, the lead item on CNN was the coronavirus scare, because there were a dozen confirmed cases in the States. Nobody was particularly taking it seriously. I wasn't either. I came back here, there were 8 confirmed cases. The first one was here in Brighton. It was in Brighton, and there was one in York, I think, at the same time. It was a little bit frightening, but nobody really knew what was coming. And then, of course, we all know what happened in both here and in the States. So I then had a crisis because I hadn't got any pictures of COVID in the States, and I didn't have any pictures of the rise after that of Black Lives Matter. So there were 2 huge events that I just hadn't covered. But then I started to look at what I had and realised that the kind of, especially the vast empty landscapes, they started to look rather different if you look at them in the context of what was about to come, almost like they were empty stage sets waiting for something to happen. And I talked to Stuart, the publisher, the owner of Gost, who publishes the books, and said, do you think I should wait, or should we go ahead with Volume 3? And he said, let's go ahead. And So I spent a long time during lockdown looking at all the pictures that I'd made since volume 2, and also the ones that I'd made since the beginning of the project that I hadn't used in volumes 1 or 2. And I think actually the edit and the sequence of volume 3, although it doesn't have maybe the big hitting pictures of volume 1, because I had all this work to choose from after 5 years. So volume 3 is a bit more subtle, but I think it's the best when it comes to the sequencing. I'm really pleased with it, and it does, I think it does refer to what happened in some kind of a bleak way. Now, I don't know what that's going to look like in years to come when someone looks at the book in 20 years and there's no, there's clearly no reference to it at all, apart from in the little afterword that I made. But I didn't have any choice. So when I go back, which will probably be in February of next year, I think that's when I'm going to go back for a month to start working on volume 4. Well, I'm just interested in what we hope will be a kind of post-COVID landscape will look like, and will it look the same, apart from shops, boarded up shops in high streets, what else is there going to be there? And I think that's what I've got to look, and I think I'll have to use sort of metaphor in some way to try and talk about it. But of course I will be really, really tuned in to where I am and what I'm doing. So I think I'm hoping I will be able to find some solutions to it, because I'm not the sort of photographer that goes into a hospital or something and starts photographing patients. So I have to sort of refer to it in some other way. And not only that, I have to bring the whole 5-volume set to some kind of conclusion.
Well, you're running out of time. 10 years.
Yeah, but I've forgotten about the 10 years now. It is what it is now, because obviously I've lost 2 years. So if I go back in February, it will be exactly 2 years, which is actually has been quite useful for me, because I was just ploughing on, maybe I was repeating myself, and now I've had some 2 years of gap to think about it.
Well, you've not exactly been sitting still. Guernsey book, more shipping forecast.
This studio.
Korea, new studio.
Yeah, I've been busy. Both the kids have left home now. The chili's come back again. So, I've had lots of interesting things going on in the family as well. But it's good. Life is good, and I feel like I'm in a good place at the moment, Neil.
An absolute pleasure to talk with the photographer Mark Power. And it did, I'll link to his work, of course, on the show page today. It did occur to me, I didn't ask at the time because I thought it would be too cheeky, and he'd certainly have somebody in mind. But I did for one moment when I found out he was getting married. I wanted to say, Mark, let me shoot your wedding. I just about stopped myself. And in the end, it turns out, and you can see it on his Instagram feed, that his daughter's gentleman friend actually made some pictures from the celebrations, and they were super too. So there we go. Well, quite the week as always. You've been fantastic with your mails and pictures and thoughts. And please keep sending them in, because it's great to know where you're walking. Send them to studio@photographydaily.show. Or, of course, join in with our marvellous community in Patreon, in the Patreon, and on the private Facebook group as well. But I've got a favour to ask this week. Favour, Neil? You asked for a favour last week, didn't you? No, not really, did I? I'm not sure I did. I'd like to ask you a favour. It's a very different kind of podcast, this. As we talked about before, it's about community. It's an opportunity to share your stories, your thoughts, your ideas. And that's really, really important. It's very different in terms of a photography podcast, which, let's face it, photography is a bit of a niche, in so much that many photography podcasts are really interview driven, and there are some super examples out there. There's many that I listen to, but this is really quite different. A gentle wander through the countryside usually, although I do have some urban visits coming up. One in particular, I hope, with John Manell. John, I promise I'm coming soon. I really am. We're gonna make that walk. We are, and make those street portraits. But it is different. It's a gentle, conversational piece, made by you, your letters and your thoughts, fueled by your amazing contributions, and the Garibaldi biscuits, particularly in the biting cold with a flask of hot coffee. But we do have the world's best kept podcast secret, you and I'm keen to build it so it can become a much larger community. Not for the reasons of likes and loves and all those rather vacuous. Vacuous? Well, that's a bit strong, Neil. I'll just hang with it because that's the word that it's in my cold mind at the moment. Must bring a woolly hat next time. But for the reasons that having the larger community means that we can discuss more things, the things that I haven't even thought about discussing. Project ideas, supports when it's needed. The incredible work of contributors like Mike today with his piece Adaptive for Photographers and Photography about conquering negative self-belief and imposter syndrome. So much more lucid of thought than my analogous high-rise thing that I talked about a couple of weeks ago. Oh, Neil, that sounds a bit negative. Is that negative thinking? There's irony. So sharing. Perhaps this week, if you get a moment while you're taking on board your coffee, and maybe a Garibaldi if you're lucky enough, is there a group or a place? It could be a Facebook group, it could be Twitter, it could be a camera club, could be an organisation. Look, you're creative. You know how to share this. Is there a way you could share the show to let others know about our experience, about taking this photo walk together of a Friday for me, but of other days during the week for you? I know it's taken on Saturdays and Sundays. I can see that in the listening figures around the world, and in particular our friends, our Australasian friends who take a Saturday photo walk. But I'd really like to invite other photographers into our very safe space that we have here, that where you and I take this walk, take in the air, make some pictures, and talk stuff. And I have high hopes for 2022 that we can really talk with those we share this common love of photography and making pictures with, pro or amateur, or of course, as I said before, those who just like to get out with their iPhones and sketchbook their lives. So that's my favour. Oh, it wasn't too bad, Neil. I think I can do that. He says, answering for you. Right, play out song time. I hope you're going to like this. I've gone quite folk leaning this week. Casa Montenegra by the Whiskey Wasps. Fabulous name for a band, for a musician. While we take our last few pictures together this week out on the photo walk, let's play out with this beautiful song. the Whiskey Wasps, playing us out today from our Photowalk. And that's it for this week. My thanks to our guests, Mark Power, Bert Stefani, Valerie Jardin and Robin Bell, and those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website, photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, tomorrow it's the Diary Show, which we call More. It may be interesting, seeing that I'll be writing and recording straight after the booster jab. It'll be a journey, perhaps a fuzzy one, I don't know, but we'll be talking about Pictures on a Page by former editor of the Sunday Times, the legendary Harold Evans. It's an extraordinary book that attempts to unpick the why behind how photojournalists work in the most intense moments, and it's available years later still to buy. Next week on the Photowalk, our guest is Robert Gumpert, who returns. Now, he was the photographer who recorded audio of the prisoners to accompany portraits he made of them in American county jails. And this time he talks about Home, the project made on the street, extremely gritty portraits of the homeless, and how they dealt with the first waves of COVID. It's an about-turn project that's going to surprise you, I know. Before that, on Wednesday, a bonus edition, an MPB special, a look behind the scenes too, as we meet the photographers who work there. Music on the show from the incredible artlist.io today, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you, and talking with you next time.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.